All right, so we're ready to go. So today we're going to talk about hashes. So we're going to talk about differences between arrays and hashes. These are data structures within Ruby, so we want to examine them and determine which to use when. We want to use some common hash methods. So we're going to talk about how to access data in a hash, update data in a hash, and just kind of interact with these hash structures. So, and then we're going to discuss the symbol data type in Ruby, as we will be using that a lot with our hashes. So what I'd like you to do as a warm-up is take a couple of minutes, and either in your journal, in a notebook, or on a text editor, I want you to just look at this array and kind of think about what would be problematic if we were using an array to store items in our fridge, and what would be a better way to structure a grocery list. Okay, so let's take about 3 minutes for you to kind of think about that. You probably would prefer this. Oh, I was trying to do one that was less obnoxious than the beeping, and that was not successful. So I apologize.
Wow, I feel like I'm getting pulled over.
I know, I'm sorry that was not fun. That's very alarming. Okay, I'll do some research on my own next time about one that has a less alarming done charm. So awesome. So I would love just for us to talk for a second about this. Nico, if you wouldn't mind coming off mute and kind of sharing your thoughts on what could be problematic about storing our grocery list this way. I know you have to search for that mute button, huh? It always hides. You're still on mute, Nico. If you can't find it, I can always go to someone else too. Okay, let me know when you're able to come off mute, and I'll have
Okay,
you.
sorry. I turned off the
yay.
monitor, and then I couldn't, for some reason, I couldn't switch to the laptop. Well, so we have the list, and then instead of having each item like that separated, right? We can have it the key, the item name is the key, and then the quantity as a value, right? So
Yeah.
for example, milk 1, eggs 6, avocado 2, tortilla 9, for example.
Right, exactly. And something you're mentioning there is like it'd be much better to have like a label saying what the item is, and then a number or value reflecting the quantity. Because if you just gave this list to, you had this list and you were going grocery shopping, it's like, wait, how many tortillas? 1, 2, 3, 4. Like you'd have to count them all, and that doesn't seem very efficient. Thank you so much for sharing, Nico. So I agree,
Yeah, sure.
having some kind of having some other kind of data structure to store this in a more efficient way would be beneficial. And of course, as Nico had talked about, that a hash will solve this problem for us. So let me get rid of this thing. That Slack stuff's in my way. So let's talk about hashes. So like an array, hash is a data structure that we use that represents a collection of things. So remember when we talked about enumerables, we said an enumerable will work on a collection. So an array is a collection of data, and a hash now is going to be representing a collection of data. If we look at a sample hash, we'll break apart the syntax and everything right now, but this is what a hash looks like. We have named values, which we call the keys, and then we have quantities, which is called the value. Okay, so we can insert data by defining what that key and what the value is. We will retrieve data in the same way by trying to like look up what is the key and what is the value associated with that key. So other languages actually call this a dictionary for this reason, that we are looking up a key and getting its definition or its value. So similar to how old school dictionaries, right, the actual physical ones, you would pull those out, look up the word. It's like trying to search the dictionary by its key and then pulling up the definition or the value. Okay, so let's start pulling apart now how we make a hash and what are these properties of a hash. So what I have right here is a variable. Okay, and the variable, then we have our assignment operator. So we are storing this hash data structure in this variable called hash example. So some things we know about hashes, they are wrapped in curly braces. Okay, so similar to an array, how an array is we use our brackets for an array, the curlies represent a hash. Okay. We have key value pairs separated by commas. Separated by commas. Okay. Each key is a unique value. So if we have one key called dogs, we cannot have another key called dogs. Okay, intuitively, that doesn't really even make sense, right? Because if we are storing the value of dogs in this key, why would we have another key of the same name? Okay, but that is actually one of the properties of the hash is we cannot have two keys that are the same. Okay, and we'll talk about what might happen if we do try to attempt to do two keys the same. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay, right? Now, let's talk about data types. Let me pull up another. So here's our a playground. This Slack or this Zoom stuff. Okay, I can see now. So here's another hash. Okay, so we have, again, our key value pairs. What do you notice about these keys, about the data type of the keys? Priya, do you notice anything about the data types of these keys?
That they are strings.
Are they all strings?
Two look like symbols, but I thought the symbol had the colon in front, so that I'm a little confused about. Is it just an object or an element?
Perfect. No, it is a symbol, and we'll talk more about that syntax later on. But I love that I love what you're thinking. How this looks like a symbol, but the syntax looks a little different than what we've seen before. Thank you, Priya. And yes, some of them are strings. Some are symbols. If we look down here in this example of a hash, we see there's an integer as a key. So the point I'm making with this is we can choose any type of object to be our key. It can be a string. It could be a symbol, which again, if you're like, what's a symbol? That's okay. We're going to talk about that in this lesson. It could be an integer. It could even be a Boolean value if we want it. So we can have any type of object be the key. Same with the value. So the value is going to be on the right side of this symbol here, which is called a hash rocket. That's like my favorite term in Ruby, is a hash rocket. So this indicates the distinction between the key and the value. So, but our values also can be a string. What is this value? It's an array of strings. So our values can be anything as well. We have a Boolean, we have an integer. Oh, look at this value. Ooh, actually, this one's kind of funky. Let's pause on this one. We'll talk about that one in a second. But this is the value. The value itself is another hash. And we call those nested data structures. Okay, we'll talk about that. But I just want you to get into this mindset that the keys and the values can be any kind of data type. Okay. Questions yet about our hashes? Yes.
Could, or rather, I guess, would it be a problem if I had a variable separate from a hash and in a separate method or elsewhere that was called that happened to be the same as a key in a hash?
Good question. So no, that should not be a problem. Depending on how you have it structured though, right, within scope, this key is specific to the hash that it lives in. Okay, so you could have two hashes that have similar keys or the same keys, but within a single hash, every key must be unique. Okay.
Got it. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, great question. Cool. So what are some differences and similarities if we do oh my goodness, hashes versus arrays? Okay. Let me ask you this. In an array, think about it for a second. Does the order matter in an array?
Yes.
Thank you, Hope. All right. So yes, and so arrays are ordered, and that order matters. How about a hash? Does the order of the key value pairs in a hash matter? I see some shaking their heads. Yeah, you're some very exuberantly shaking their heads. Yeah, that is correct. So in a hash, the order does not matter. This key value pair, we could move it over here as long as we add our comma. We can move it over there, and it doesn't matter because how we will access this hash is via the keys. So we're not looking now for element at index 0 or element at index 5. We don't care about the order. We're going to go into this hash and query it or try to access data via the key. So it doesn't really matter where the key is. So in a hash, order doesn't matter. Okay. That's probably, well, that's the main difference. We'll talk about some more. We'll add to this list as we go. Okay. Oh, actually, well, yes, we will continue to add to this as we go. So let's talk a little bit now about how we access a value. Because if we go to like this one, let's say, so we've got this hash called suitcase. Maybe we're packing for a trip. This does remind me of the warm-up, how with the fridge, we could convert this fridge list array into a nice hash that lists the quantities for us. Okay, but we might want to access this and say, okay, in our suitcase, how many pairs of socks do we have? So our syntax we use is actually bracket notation, which is similar to an array. So I'm going to put that here. So both use bracket notation to query a value. Right? In an array, for example, if I wanted to query this array, my fridge items 1, and access the 6th element or the element at index 5, how would I do that? Hash, do you want to come off mute and tell me how I would query that with this array?
I'm sorry, did you say me? I got confused with all the hashes going around.
Oh my goodness, you're so right.
Did you query hash about querying hashes?
I did. That must have been some kind of like unconscious. Actually, know what it is? I look for faces. So I saw your face first. That's hilarious. But
Question. I'm sorry, I got confused.
I did too. So how would I query this array to find the 5th element?
The 5th element, it would be fridge underscore items 1. And then you would just put in brackets number 4, I think, right?
Correct, right? Because we're 0 index. So my 5th element is the element at index 4. So yeah, right? Thank you, Hash. So to query an array, we use bracket notation. Well, we're going to use the same idea with querying a hash. So for a hash, to query a specific value, we do the name of the hash, just like up here we did the name of the array. We're going to use bracket notation. But now because order doesn't matter, we're going to query the value via the key. So we need to know which key we want. And right now we're interested in the socks. So we have to, socks is a string. So in our brackets, we need to do a string and the words socks. Okay, let me actually do a pry here so we can look at this. Great. Can you all see the bottom of my screen? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Yes? Okay, wonderful. So if we look, so the variable suitcase is holding our hash. Okay, we've got our hash rockets here. And so if we want to query it, we use our bracket notation. We match the data type, and our return value is what the value of that key is. Okay, so same thing here. If we wanted to know how many jeans we have, We just call that key using bracket notation, and we get back the value associated with that specific key.
Can you do the reverse and search for the value to return the key?
You can. You can. So not using bracket notation, but there are other methods that you can use to search using the values. But actually, Daniel, since you bring that up, why do you think that could be more difficult if we try to search that reverse way? And I hope everyone's thinking about it right now.
You probably wouldn't know the value, so it would probably be difficult because you wouldn't have that information on hand.
Sure, we might not know the value, but also what if we had something like this? Shirts for shoes for, right? So values are not unique. So if we query via a value, what key would we get back? I don't know is the answer. We could always go to our Ruby docs and figure that out. Maybe we'll get to that. But because the keys are unique, then we know if we query the key, we're going to get the specific value for that specific key. Great question. All right, so that's how we query. Okay. Other questions right now, because I'm going to have you write for a minute. Okay, what I would love for you to do, take a minute and in your notebooks, write down your definition of a hash or what you know about a hash so far.
He seems like a nice guy.
All right, hash the data structure, not hash the person.
Thank you for clarifying, Kat. Also, why do I feel like we went over hashes like way later last time?
I don't know. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. It's so obnoxious. Okay. Cool. So sit with that definition. We're going to continue to refine that and add to it as we go through the lesson. Okay. Wonderful. So how do we construct a hash? That's what we want to talk about next. Because you might want a hash in your project, just say. So let's create a new hash. So one way we can create a new hash is by just typing it out literally. Remember, hashes are wrapped in curly braces. So just as like for an array, if we had some kind of list, we could create an array literally like this. We could do that same thing with a hash. Let's stick with our suitcase. And now we have a new hash called suitcase. Okay, we literally just created that data structure. The other thing we can do, so hash is its own class within Ruby. So we could call that class and initialize a new hash, hash.new. Actually, I want to, I'll jump in probably in just a second. Okay, the cool thing about when we initialize it like this is we could give it a default value. Let's explore that for a second. So let's run this and go into our pry. Let me pull this up a little. Okay, so, oh, I don't like now that I called these the same thing. We'll do suitcase 1, suitcase 2. Okay, so if we call suitcase 1, we have an empty hash. I would expect that we have the same thing with suitcase 2. Okay, so what would happen? What do you think? Let's make a guess. I'm going to query the suitcase. First of all, is there any key values currently in my suitcase? No. Perfect. Great job, everyone. So I want to query my socks. What will be my return value when I hit enter? So I'm querying my hash for a key that we know doesn't exist because we just determined there are no key value pairs inside this hash. So what will be the return value? Make a guess in your head. All right, let's see. No. Is that what you thought? Cool. Some people are nodding. Awesome. So nil is our return value. So here's what we can do. Maybe we don't want that, right? A nil value can create some problems in your code. Maybe you always want this to return a 0 if there's no socks instead of a nil, so that we always want it to return an integer. So what we can do is define a default value. So if we make another suitcase and initialize a new hash and pass it an argument, then this argument will become a default value. Okay, now this hash looks the same, right? If I do suitcase 3, there's still no key value pairs in here. This is like a magic trick I'm setting you up for. Are you ready for this? So let's query again now. Oh, we want suitcase 3. We're going to query the socks. And what do you think, based on the last few sentences, what do you think will be the return value? 0. Okay, so we can utilize that in your code if you always want a query to return a value and not no. Okay, so store that away in your notes. Definitely jot that down. We're going to leave this topic for a second, but you're definitely going to want to remember that. Okay?
Can you quickly
So
just run suitcase 3 without querying
Absolutely.
anything? Okay.
Yeah. What were you thinking? What was your thought process right there?
Well, I didn't know if the query with the default added a key with the value 0 or it just changed the return message or the return value.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that you were thinking about that. So we're going to get to that in just a second.
So Kat,
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
now that we've seen you add a default value to a hash, can that be done with an array or anything else?
I don't think an array can have a default value because it's looking, the arrays are looking very specifically at an index. So that's a good question. Other things can have default values. Think about like a method. If you make an argument optional, that's also like setting a default value of an argument. So a lot of things can have default values. Now I'm curious about the array thing. Oh, we'll look into that. We'll put that in the parking lot. All right, let's explore. Oh, well, we're still talking about just creating hashes. When we talk about creating a hash literally like this, we can also create it with initial values. So if we go back to this suitcase, this is just another example of where I created a literal hash with key value pairs already inside of it. Okay, just remember that when you create it like this, you cannot set a default value at this given time. Okay, there might be ways to set a default value later, but if you know you want a default value, it might be best just to set it with the default value right off the bat. Okay, and then add key value pairs to it later as you go. Okay. All right, so what we're going to do right now is we're going to do a little exploration. I'm going to put you into some breakout rooms. Yeah, we'll do that, and then we'll take a palm after the breakout room. So I'm going to put some things for you to explore in the Slack channel. You might not know the answers, and that's okay. I just want you to start this discussion by considering questions that you don't know the answer to. It actually starts the process of creating those neural pathways in your brain so that when you learn the answers, they are more solidified in your brain. So it's a good practice to ask questions you know that you don't know the answer to. So I'm going to have you do that practice with 2 to 3 different people. I'm sorry, I know I'm trailing off. I'm trying to create breakout rooms right now for you. Hey, All right, I'm going to create the breakout room, send you the invitation, and then I will drop the questions for you to review in the Slack channel. One of you will screen share with a text editor, and you'll be exploring some properties of hashes together. Okay, any questions? Not sure because you don't know what you're doing yet, right? All right. Hope, did you get a invite? Perfect. I didn't give them a time. Recording's back on. Thumbs up if you can hear me and see my screen. All right, that helps me so I'm not like on mute while I talk. So, all right, so let's kind of review these items. I'll start a prize session, and I'm going to call on Garrett first. If you want to help me, let me set up my prize session here, but I'll ask you to start with this first thing about adding 3 shirts to our suitcase and how we can accomplish that. So, oops, not pry. I want to run my playground. Great, so I'm at the place where I have my suitcase hash with socks and jeans in it. And Garrett, what did your group discuss on how to add 3 shirts to the suitcase?
Yeah, so we did suitcase, then in brackets, shirts equals 3.
Like that?
And then that, yeah, the equals 3 is outside of the, yeah. And then we've also found a store method that works too. But
oh, yeah, this is what you'll see most commonly. Okay,
Mhm.
So cool. Well, we got a return value of 3. That's interesting. Good to note. And then let's check out our suitcase now. And yes, there are shirts in it. Okay, so this is how we can dynamically add key value pairs to the hash. You could also like literally just go into one and add the key value pair yourself like that, right? Sometimes in code, you're not going to be able to do that. Sometimes you will. Most times you need to access it this way in the prize session, where we can call on the existing hash and add key value pairs to it. All right, great. Thank you so much, Garrett. And then how about add a key value pair of swimsuit true to your suitcase? Well, this is the exact same thing, right? So we have, we're going to query. It's still bracket notation to like query the key, but when we do the assignment operator, it sets that key value pair for us. And so here, remember, keys can be any object, and the values can be any kind of object. So setting a Boolean as the value is legal, Ruby legal. Awesome, now we have swimsuit true as our key value pair.
Hey Kat, we got an awesome question on the chat.
Oh, what is it?
Priya says, why should suitcase bracket shirts equals 3 be better than suitcase dot store parentheses shirts comma 3?
Yeah, good question. To be honest with you, I've never heard of this dot store method. So I do have my Ruby docs open right now to my hash class. So we can go ahead and look at that. Actually, let me change this to my version of Ruby that I'm working with, 5.3. Okay, so dot store. Cool, so store associates the value with the key given by the key. So if we have a hash, return value looks the same. So it's another way to do it. So key should not have its value changed while it uses the key. Cool, right? In Ruby and a lot of programming languages, there's lots of different ways to do a thing. But to be honest, I have not seen .store, and I'm not sure why. Could be because in other languages, accessing a hash looks very similar to this, so it gives it some consistency across different languages. Some languages, not all of them. So, but typically you'll see it this way. What's the return value? I'm curious to the return values. It still returns just the value. So you could definitely use this one too, because setting a key this way, so say we wanted to set a new key of shoes, equals 2. So the return value is still the value. And if we did the suitcase.store and we did we already have socks, pants, we'll just do pants. And then we'll say 6. Yeah, we still get the same return value of 6. And then let's check out our suitcase. Shoes are in here and pants are in here. So it seems to have the same behavior. But typically you see it with bracket notation. Yes.
Kat, do you mind doing a dot merge and seeing if it's the same return value? I'm just curious if they're all the same.
So that one returns the hash. I just checked.
Okay, cool. Thanks,
Awesome.
Tyler.
This is great, right? When you're not sure about something, go to the docs, but then I always like to try it myself in Pry to really test out what the return values are. Did it manipulate the original structure I was working with? Those are things to be testing out in Pry. So great job and great thought process to everyone who was just involved in that. So good job. Perfect. And you're seeing there's lots and lots of ways to do a thing, right? Perfect. And oh, okay. The other thing I wanted to say is let's talk about unique values, right? So we said keys have to be unique. So what would happen, think to yourself, if we did suitcase socks, right? We already have socks. Oh gosh, I can't type. But we did this. So this is the syntax of setting a new key, but we already have a key called socks. So what will happen when I press enter? So make a guess in your head. Right, let's see if you were right. Okay, returns 9, fine, but let's see what happened to suitcase. Changed it to 9, right? So when you do this assignment, if that key already exists, this new assignment will override that key value pair and replace it with this new key value pair. Okay, so you're going to want to be careful with that. Okay, we'll store this in your memory. We're going to come back and talk about this. Oh, I forgot to start the POM timer. Okay, so now how about what if we want to take the socks out of our suitcase? Sean, what did your group discuss for taking the socks, removing the socks from our suitcase?
We called the delete method on suitcase, and we specified socks.
Okay, so you called the delete method on suitcase and then passed an argument. Is that how you specified it?
I think so.
Let's try
yeah,
it.
I'm pretty
see
sure.
What happens.
Maybe not.
Well, that's okay. And if we're never not sure, that's why we have our handy documentation. So we can see this delete method takes an argument of the key and should return the value and should delete, and it deletes the key value pair from the hash. So let's try that out. So we deleted socks, return the value, and then if we check out suitcase, socks are gone. Awesome. Great job. Cool. So check for how many jackets. We already know how to do that. Remember, what will the value be when I press enter right here? Nil, right? Is that what you thought? Right, because that key did not exist. We didn't set it to anything, so it did not set the key value pair, and we have no default value for this hash, so the return is nil when that key does not exist. Okay, all right, did you explore this one? If we do the suitcase.keys, which is down here, this last one, I'm not sure if you got to it or not, but exploring that, if we do suitcase.keys, I mean, this is the cool thing about Ruby. If I knew nothing about this method, I would guess it would give me back all the keys somehow. And it does. So it returns an array containing all the keys. And what do you think dot values will do? Hopefully you're saying the same thing. Yes, I see nods, right? Yep, it gives us back all of the values. Okay. Again, just something to store away. Maybe you need it, maybe you don't. Because what this does do is disassociate the keys and the values, right? They're no longer key value pairs, but they are in an ordered array. Just something to note. You could use that at some point. Okay, any questions that we didn't get to that came up in your breakout rooms?
Wait, you said it disassociates those? So you'll no longer
Well,
have them as part of the hash?
well, I'm sorry. They are still part of the hash. So the hash is not changed when you call .keys or .values, right? But now the only way to know how many genes you have is by finding this array and knowing which index to look at. Okay, but what if this array gets shifted somehow? Okay, now I have no way of knowing how many genes I have and how many shirts I have when I call .keys or .values. So I was just kind of illustrating that when we take those out of the key value pairs, out of the hash, we lose some context.
Okay.
And not that you need to do anything with that right now. It's just more information for you to collect. Okay, awesome. All right, we are plugging away. Okay, now what if, oh, I should have stayed in this. Let me go back in here. Because what if we want to, all right, we're back to our standard suitcase. But I'm going to extend my trip a little bit, so I need some more socks. Okay, how do you think, actually, this is another challenge. We haven't discussed this yet. So think to yourself, see if you can write this in your notebook or in your text editor. If I want to add 2 pairs of socks, how would I do that? And I don't want to just rewrite it, because say I don't know how many socks I currently have. I don't know if I have 4 or 5 or 6, I can't remember. But all I know is that at this point, I want to add 2 more pairs of socks. How might I accomplish that? So think about for 15 seconds. Okay, so knowing what we know about return values when we query a key, about how we reset keys, let's see. Carson, do you have any ideas or thoughts on how we might add 2 pairs of socks to our suitcase hash?
So you would want to do suitcase, regular bracket, quotation socks and bracket plus equal to.
Plus equals 2. So let's do the longhand version of this instead of the shortcut for just a second. So what do you know what the longhand version is?
I don't.
Oh, then I'm extra glad we're doing this. So this is actually a shorthand for reassigning a variable. For example, let's take this away real quick. Shoot. So if we had, say, like x equals 5, and we wanted to add 2 to that, we could do x equals x plus 2, right? Because in Ruby, we evaluate the right-hand side of the assignment operator first. It says, okay, x right now is 5, so I'm going to add 2, that's 7. Now I'm going to store the value of 7 in a variable x, and it's going to override this one, okay? So, and now x is 7. So this, because we do this reassignment so often, we have a shortcut of this. So now x is 9. Okay. All right. So now let's go back to our suitcase, and we have our socks. So we're going to reassign that, right, to whatever current suitcase socks currently is, and add 2. Right. So remember, what will this expression, whoops, if I had it written correctly, what would that expression return? And Carson, if you're still off mute, you can answer that question. What will suitcase socks return?
The new one would return 6. With the plus 2. Just the original one, it would return 4.
Perfect, because remember where I am right now, what I have highlighted is on the right side of the assignment operator. So, which means it's going to evaluate the current state of suitcase socks, which is 4, and then add 2, and then it will reassign that. So then this will become 6, the right hand becomes 6, and then we have our, what we've been looking at up here, where we're assigning the value like this. Okay,
Kat,
I hope.
could you do just suitcase socks plus 2 without having it being set equal to anything?
Oh, that's a great question. All right, so let's explore that. So suitcase right now, we have socks of 6 and jeans of 1, right? So Danny's saying, what if we did suitcase socks, right? And then just did plus 2 and didn't assign it to anything, right? What would I get right now? When I press enter, what will I get? Think in your head. Someone says 6, someone says, right? Because socks, this is my current suitcase right here, because I already added 2. So suitcase bracket sock should give me 6 plus 2 gives me 8, right? But now let's look at suitcase. Unchanged, right? Because I didn't reassign that key to the updated value. All I did was take that value out of the hash and add 2 to whatever this statement evaluated to. Okay, and it gave me a correct answer, but we didn't update it. So if you want to actually update the value in your hash, you need to do this reassignment, where we do socks, bracket equals, and then we do the query, socks plus 2. Okay, so that will actually reassign our key to 8. Okay. And after you do this statement enough times, then you can go ahead and start using the shorthand, which is just plus equals 2. So this statement right here is a shortcut for reassigning a variable to a new value. So now we should have 10 socks. Awesome. Questions about anything we just kind of talked about in here? Okay. All right.
I have a
so
question.
Then let's keep, perfect, go for it.
Sorry. In your like coding experience, have you ever come to like a moment where you wanted to get the return number of whatever value was in a hash, but not permanently update that hash integer, kind of like what happened now where we added the number 2 and we got the return value 8, but we didn't want to like mutate or transform our original hash? Like, is there?
Yeah. I'm going to answer that with the most infamous answer that you're ever going to get in coding with like, it depends on the situation.
Yeah. Okay. Never mind.
Exactly. Right. But this is a good thing to think about, to understand, like, how can I manipulate the value without changing the original hash? But then also, how do I do it when I want to update the original hash? Okay. So you should have both all that knowledge in your tool belt, so that whatever the context is, you can handle that situation.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. Great question. Okay, so let's explore a little more. I'm not keeping up with my notes, so that is okay. Are we here? Okay, let's do this. So we've already talked about how to update. Let's talk about iteration. Should we do that? I want to do that. So jot down in your notes right now, if I just wanted to, I have an array, okay, context shift, I have an array now called close. If I want to print out each element of close, how would I do that? And just jot it down like in your notebook or in your text editor. Okay, and then if I can have Saren, if you wouldn't mind coming off mute and helping me write, how would I accomplish this? How would I print out every element of my close array?
Yeah, so you would want to do close dot each do, and then I guess close. You can just do close probably in there.
Maybe item.
Yeah, item. That's fine.
Okay.
And then just puts item.
Yeah, puts item. Right. So if we run this file now, yep, and we just put each item. Perfect. So again, you know, we've been talking about enumerables a lot lately, and remember, enumerables work on collections. So we've been focusing on arrays, but now we have another kind of collection. We have a hash, and an enumerable can work on a hash as well. So remember the syntax here for calling an enumerable on an array is we have the array, we call the method on it, we pass it a code block, we declare a block variable, and then we do something to that block variable, okay? With our hash, it's gonna be very similar. So let's say now, do I have a hash here? I do. So let's say we wanna print over, we want to iterate over our suitcase hash and print out something to the extent where it would print out like, I have, oh gosh, I have 4 socks, and then we'd want it to say, I have 2 jeans. Right, so we're printing out our quantity of and the key. We're printing out, or sorry, the value and the key. So the syntax for iterating over a hash is very, very similar. We're still going to call the name of our hash. We're going to call our enumerable on it. Going to pass it a code block. I'll leave the pipes for a second. Okay. Now, here's where it gets a little bit different. Is now we're going to have 2 block variables. Okay, because what's going to happen is that dot each now, instead of passing each element to the block variable, it's going to pass each key value pair to the block variable. Okay, so we need to name these appropriately. I'm going to do a generalized variable naming first, just to show you. So this is going to be the key, and this will be the value. Okay, so now we'll have access to just the key with whatever we call this block variable, and the value with whatever we call that block variable. Okay, please, please, please do not call your block variables key and value. Okay, it is not descriptive of the data they're going to be holding. Just like for here, we wouldn't want to call this X, right? We want to call it what it represents. It represents a clothing item. So here, maybe we call this item, and maybe we actually call this the quantity. Okay, so again, your variables should reflect the data they are holding. Okay, and now here, not much different. Now I just have 2 variables to work with. So I can just put out a string of I have, and do some string interpolation here. I'm going to call my quantity variable, and then my item. Period. Okay, did that work? Awesome. I have 4 socks, I have 2 jeans. Okay.
I just want to thank you for being grammatically correct for this example and adding the
Yeah,
period.
but here's, oh, you're welcome. And that my degree actually is in English literature, but don't ask me to spell anything because I'm the worst. So, but speaking about grammatically correct, like, if you, like, what if I only had 1 jeans? That doesn't make sense. I have 1 jeans. That's something you're gonna have to think about, right? If you want your code to be grammatically correct, that is something you will need to think about. All right, cool. So what questions do you have about how to iterate over a hash?
Can you repeat the question?
The question was for a call for questions. So.
Oh, okay. I was just like, I'm sitting here lost. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
So in that block variable, you have 2 items, if you delete item, and then in your string interpolation, if you maybe just delete or hard code the item since it's no longer there, how does Ruby figure out when quantity, what is that referring to?
Great question. Let's put a pry in there and open it up and take a look. So if we run this, awesome. Let me make this bigger. We are inside of my code block. Okay, we're inside this code block. Let's see what our variable quantity is holding. Interesting. So I'm going to make the assumption, right? And we can always go check the docs as well. If you do it over a key, over a hash, if you don't comma separate those two block variables, it's going to put the key value pair in an array, comma separated, as two distinct elements. Okay, that's actually a good thing to note. There probably is some situation where you would want this.
And you could call quantity like dot first or 0.
Sure.
I would assume.
Well, yeah, because right. Yep. Good assumption, right? Because now this returns an array, and so I can call any kind of array methods on that now. Okay. Well, let me ask you a follow-up question to that, Dan, and then I know someone else had a question. So 1 second. What do you think would be the con? So the downside to doing it like this way, like if I did, oh gosh, quantity, let's use bracket notation, like this would be the 0 and this would be the 1. What would be the downside to doing it this way? Any ideas? That's okay if you have no idea. It looks great to me, Kat. No downsides. Anyone else have an idea of what is a downside to this?
Maybe I cannot call the value or the key specifically.
Well, if I know like the key is always going to be in element 0 and the value is always going to be in 1, then I kind of know which one's the key and the value. I think someone else is going to say something too.
Could it be that you kind of lose functionality of the two unique separate pieces of the key versus the value? It kind of makes it less like a hash and more like an array?
I like what you say about you lose, maybe not functionality, but you lose some context, right? Remember those variables, when we have them separated, are very descriptive about what data they're holding, right? We know this represents the item, and we know this represents the quantity. So it's very descriptive and developer friendly. Whereas if we are just treating this as one array and accessing the elements by 0 and a 1, we lose some context. And then the next time we visit this code in a year from now, we have to work a little bit harder to say, okay, what was that first element? What did that represent? What did that second element represent?
Oh, and also if you're doing that for each, I think it kind of defeats the purpose of using each.
Potentially, you're going to have the same behavior though with other enumerables if you're using like map or select or different things like that.
No, but I meant going back to where you had like 0 in brackets with the quantity and 1 with the item, or whichever way it went.
Mm-hmm.
Like, doesn't that completely defeat the purpose of using an each?
I don't know about that because we're still like iterating over each key value pair. It's just putting it into this block in a different structure. Okay, and then if we could go back before we started this kind of side conversation, someone else had a question. I'm not sure if you still have that question.
I think I was just going to ask, would we be able to list it as, like if you just had one block variable, for instance, item, and you did, I have item dot value, like Octothorpe item dot value, and then Octothorpe item dot key, would it print?
Well, remember when we did it with a single block variable, it's stored in that variable in array.
An array.
So we
Okay.
don't have, yep, so we don't have methods for an array of .key and .value. So we would get an error. I think, oh, I'm still in this price session. Here, do you want to see what error? Anyone know what error you're going to get?
No implicit conversion.
Ooh.
Or undefined method,
Close.
yeah, for array.
Right, yep, undefined method key for this array. So it's saying you're calling this method on an array. I have no idea what you're talking about. Good question. Okay, let's segue for a second. We're talking about like lots of little pieces of hashes, and we're going to bring it all together. So what we're going to do now is talk about symbols for a second. So let me just wrap up with in terms of enumerators with hashes. It works very, very similar to calling enumerators on arrays. What you'll just have to watch out for is sometimes the return values can be different. So you'll want to make sure you go to Ruby enumerables. Like open up your actual docs for enumerables, and it will show you, if we go to each, let's go map. It should tell you returns a new array with the results of running block. Some of these have different return values. Not that one. Depending on whether you call it on a hash versus an array. So not map. Map will always actually return an array, even if you call it on a hash. Interesting. We'll have to play with that. Where's select though? So remember we said select and find all are synonymous on arrays. It's when you call them on hashes that you might see some different behaviors. So make sure you refer to your docs when using these enumerables with hashes to make sure that you know the return value, or heck, try it and pry and see what the return value is. Okay. Okay. Let's shift for a second. So ready, context switch. We're going to talk about symbols for a second. So what is a symbol? Let's get some notes here. A symbol. We're not going to go too deep on symbols right now. I just want you to be kind of familiar with what they are. So a symbol, what does a symbol look like? Priya talked about this a little bit in the very beginning, but a symbol is like a string in Ruby. It starts with a colon. Okay, so we might see it like this, or maybe you'll see it like a date of birth. Okay, these are symbols. Where have you seen symbols before in code that you've been writing?
Adder reader.
Yeah, perfect, right? So I'm doing it over on this side now, just so that it'll Ruby format. So when we do our adder readers, right, you're using symbols. Okay, and this symbol it's a place that we can store information. It's like a label. And in Ruby, there's some stuff going on under the hood here, but it's a label for the method that reads back the attribute of name. So the instance variable of @name, right? That's what this shortcut is for. Okay, I'll comment those out or I'll get some errors. So symbols are, let's play here a little bit. Okay, so they're kind of like strings. They are more efficient than strings. Why are symbols more efficient? And that's what I want to look at. So let's go into a pry session and let's make some variables. Symbol 1, we're going to create a symbol called name. Okay. So our variable symbol 1 is holding, I'm sorry, but no, I'm going to get words all mixed up now. Can I reassign this? I'm going to say A is a name. All right, so I have a variable called A with a symbol of name in it. Okay, I'm going to create another variable called B, also with a symbol of name. So same symbol, but I'm storing them in different variables. Okay, now let's see where Ruby put these in memory. So if we call object ID on an object, it will show us a memory location where Ruby is storing this. Okay, so we can see that my variable A is stored here. Now where is my B stored? Same exact location. Okay, So what Ruby is doing is it's seeing, oh, I already have a symbol called name. So I'm just going to allow this variable to refer to the same place in memory. I'm not going to use more memory to create this new symbol. Okay, let's do this with, my variables right here are terrible, but let's do it with strings. Let's reset that. All right, so I have a variable C of hello and a variable D of hello. Okay, so now let's check out where these are living. Object ID, right, lives somewhere else. Now, what do you think this one's going to be? Does Ruby also look at the string and point it to the same place in memory, or does it create a new memory location? New memory location. Okay, so even though these strings are the same, Ruby doesn't know that. And it stores these strings in a new memory location. Whereas with symbols, it stores it in the same memory location. Okay, if you're like, I have no idea what the heck you're talking about right now, that is okay. All right, this is stuff you can dig into deeper. But the point of all this is that symbols tend to be more efficient as for naming purposes. So anytime you want to like attach a label to something, I think of this in terms of like transactions. If you think about a transaction, it can have a label of where it is in its progress. It could be pending, it could be completed, it could be like payment received. And these are labels you might want to reuse over and over for one of those transaction objects. So it's a naming convention. And because of this efficiency, symbols are very, very often used as the keys of hashes. Okay, so symbols make very good keys for hashes because it's like a naming, a device you can use for naming or labeling. Okay, again, if this means nothing to you, that's okay. You could just tune out everything I just said and just like side note, explore symbols later in Ruby. Okay, so let's look at syntax for what this would look like. Let's change our suitcase hash to use symbols. So suitcase, so symbols start with a colon, socks. We're going to use our hash rocket. Right now we have a key value pair, and then we have, what do we have? I don't know, it doesn't matter. Pants, 2. Okay. Over pry up here. Okay, so let's put a pry here. How do you think, hold please. Palms coming up. That's what that meant. Let's run this. Okay, how do you think, who have I not called on for a while? Let's see. Leah, what do you think? Wait, did I see Leah?
Hey.
Okay, sorry. The pictures keep shifting on me, so I thought I saw you. What do you think, like now, if I want to query my suitcase hash to find out how many pairs of socks I have, how can I do that now? I've changed the data type of my key.
I think it would be the same as if you were querying it with a string, so maybe using bracket notation, but colon socks this time.
Yeah, colon socks. Let's try it. Awesome. Right, so the bracket notation, whatever's inside the bracket, that key you're querying needs to match the data type of the key of how it's written in the hash. So if we try now to do suitcase socks with a string, we're going to get nil. It's saying you don't have a string of socks, okay, but it recognizes the symbol. Okay, so oftentimes this, for efficiency and quickness, this is how we write our hashes, kind of. There's another shortcut. Let me show you this. The hash rocket notation can get a little cumbersome to write when we have big hashes. So what we can do, Ruby gives us this handy dandy notation to flip-flop the colon, which is what you saw at the very, very beginning. So we'll say socks colon 4. Okay, so that becomes a shortcut to indicate this is a symbol and the value is 4. So it's a key value pair. We're just omitting the hash rocket and moving the colon to the other side. So pants 2, 3. Okay, so this is probably the most popular way, most common way that you will see a hash written. Okay, but I do want you to be able to recognize all these other ways that hashes could be written. Okay. So what data type is this?
A symbol.
You're off mute. You can. Good job. Thank you. All right, and now go ahead. Continue with your question.
But just to clarify, for syntax, when you're querying, you would still put the colon in front of socks.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what I wanted you to ask. So, right. So here, this is my hash written this way. I have it on lines 128 through 131. So if we query now suitcase, we still, want to query it via a symbol. So now you could, well, actually, this would still be a symbol. If you had it like this is actually still a symbol. It's not a string. It has quotation marks. Symbols can do that. So a symbol can actually also be any data type, which is kind of, did that just blow your mind? Okay, sorry. Let's just not do that.
What if you want to
But if you see that
with the colon?
Oh, good. Yeah, let's do that. But the last point I just want to make is if you see this colon here where the hash rocket would be, it means you're dealing with symbols, okay? Otherwise, you'll see the hash rocket. Okay, so what if we want to, he says, what was the question again? You want to add more socks?
Yeah, just add more socks with the shorthand, with the colon.
Yeah, perfect. So same exact idea. So suitcase socks, right? It's still going, when we query this key, it will still return to us the value. So we can still use our, well, we could reassign it. Let's do it the longhand way. Suitcase socks, oh gosh, plus 2. And now we have 6, and suitcase is changed to 6. Same thing if we want to add another key value pair. The idea is the same. We're just specifying in the bracket notation that we are using symbols. So if we wanted to have jackets, now we can set that equal to 7. It's really cold, I guess. And now we have jackets, okay? What I will encourage you to do is be consistent with your symbols, right? So, or I'm sorry, consistent with your keys. So if all your keys are strings, keep all of your keys as strings. If all of your keys are symbols, keep all of your keys as symbols. Okay, we want to have some consistency. Okay, our timer did go off. Let's take another quick palm and then we will do some more exploration and breakout rooms for you to practice. Okay, so at 3:31, we will be back in here.
Thank you, 31.
Okay. So I'm going to attempt to put you into the same breakout rooms. You'll spend, we'll go for about the 7 minutes again. I may adjust that though. I'll be popping in and out of your rooms to see how you're doing and where everyone's at. So, but let's shoot for 7 minutes and see how far that gets us. And then we'll come back together. So the prompts for what you're doing now I just dropped it into your Slack channel. Let me create those breakout rooms. And then you will switch driver navigator. So whoever, if you're in a pair, that'll be easy. If you're in a threesome, just decide on someone else who will be sharing their screen. But you're gonna build hashes again and go ahead and do it with symbols. You need to use symbols this time, okay? All right, rooms are open. Okay, I think we are all back. I know that was quick. It was pretty much the same as the first thing you did, except a different data type and just, want to get you into that repetition. So if you can check me real quick, thumbs up if you can hear me and see my screen. Thank you so much. That's like my own sanity check. All right, what questions came up that time as you were exploring, whether they pertain like specifically to the questions the task that you were asked to accomplish, or if they didn't even?
Kat, I have a question about the instructions, kind of.
Oh, okay.
What, and the second to last bullet point, and only shirts in parentheses, what, I mean, I don't know if I don't think I understand that, because I would read it the same way if the parentheses weren't there, I guess.
So would I.
Okay, I was
I
just
don't-
making sure I wasn't crazy.
No, I don't have a good answer for you on that one.
My group, I don't know if this is quite what you were asking, but my group kind of took it as if it had just said check how many shirts, couldn't we pull the entire hash and confirm the number there versus pulling the query shirts and getting just the return value of the number. It's kind of what we talked about.
Yeah, I like that. Right? Yep, because you could just say, like what you're saying, you could just, I'm not gonna pry. You could literally just type the variable suitcase, print out the entire hash, and yes, you could get your answer, but that doesn't seem very efficient, right? More efficient is just pull that key and look it up via that key for that value. Cool. What other questions?
One question my group had was with when we were trying to add a new variable like shirts 3, we would do suitcase square bracket shirts, and then accidentally we put the colon instead of before shirts, like colon shirts as a symbol. We did shirts with the colon afterward, and it turned blue. And does the positioning of the colon in the square brackets matter?
So you did like this?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely it matters, right? Because what goes inside of here is the data type. And so we have to indicate it's a symbol. And so to indicate something as a symbol, it starts with that colon. I know it gets a little funky right here, right? If you look up at this suitcase, am I recording? Yes, sorry. Because the colon is on the right-hand side, remember that's just a Ruby shorthand thing to indicate here's a symbol and here's a hash rocket. But this gets really tedious to do hash rockets all the time. So Ruby gave us this very nice shorthand. Oh, look at that though. Remember, it has to be touching. I'm glad I made that mistake. So no spaces there.
Okay, so when I make an object literal, like suitcase up here on 128, and I have these aren't strings, these keys on the left, they're symbols, even though the colon's on the right-hand side.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Anytime you see this colon here, this is a symbol. Even if it's like this, let me exit and rerun this real quick. Okay, so right now I have suitcase, right? Do you notice right here, these are still symbols? Can you see that? I know that's kind of light, right? They're still symbol. Yeah, they're super light yellow. Maybe I highlight it, gets a little better, right? So even when we wrap something in, this is a symbol. This is also a symbol. The reason this exists is because if we have spaces, like we could say socks, socks and shirts, that is a symbol. Why am I doing it there? Let me do it here. So if we say socks, that is a symbol. But then if we did socks and shirts, it's still a symbol, but this is how we indicate spaces. It looks really weird. You don't see this too often. What the point I'm trying to illustrate is just that if there is a colon in front of the thing, it is a symbol. Okay. Even if it has quotation marks and looks like a string, it is a symbol. So if you see this colon like this, that is a shorthand for this. Okay. And so it is a symbol, even though the colon's on the wrong side. You're not going to see this too often, a colon with the parentheses, but I do want you to know that that is still a symbol.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Absolutely.
Sorry, additional to piggyback. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
It would be pretty awesome though if you ended up having to like inherit a hash that was created and you wanted to change them all to symbols, that there's like a string interpolation that you could do and that could transform them into symbols. So that's really nifty.
Yeah, that's a great point. I could think of some kind of situation where maybe you did have a hash like this with strings and you wanted to convert them all into symbols. based off what we've learned in this lesson, maybe you can use some kind of iterator, right, to create a new hash that takes the key that's right now a string and changes it into a symbol. Okay, there's going to be some easier ways to do that later on as we progress, actually. That's for another month, though, actually. So, okay, any other questions that came up during your breakouts?
This wasn't necessarily a question so much as we like observed something in our group.
Okay.
I don't know if this is even the right phrase, but like the hash genesis matters. Like doing hash.new versus hash.new parentheses automatic value will give you different results when you go to check for the key that doesn't exist in your hash.
Yeah, absolutely. Where did I have that? Somewhere. But yeah, exactly. So, right, we can think about some situations where, what if we had the suitcase, right? Let's make a new one. Let's say suitcase 2, and let's do it with a default value, right? Okay. Now, maybe we have some kind of method that says whatever item I give you, whether it's socks or pants or jackets, just put it in there, put quantity 2 of this thing in there. So maybe you have some kind of method that does that, that takes, I'm totally just thinking off the top of my head, so forgive me if I obliterate this, but like add item, and then maybe you pass it a thing. Let's pass it an item. Oh, this is not going to work here in my pry. But if we had a method that was like add item and you could pass it an item, okay, and then, oh gosh, whatever that item was, we want to be able to add it to our suitcase. We want to add 2 things, right? So maybe this is a method and I have no idea what's in my suitcase, but I know I want to add, can I put a pry here and play with this here? Let's try it. I got 2 pries. Okay, am I in my second pry? Here we are. All right, so now my suitcase, right, has socks and it has pants. Maybe I don't know that though, but let's say I want to add item. What do I want to add? Let's add shoes. It breaks, right? Because what is this return value? Because right here in my method I created, suitcase for item. So here I passed in the symbol shoes. So it's querying suitcase shoes. What is the return value of this expression right now in this situation? Any ideas?
Nil.
Nil, right? How do you add 2 to nil? The answer is you can't. Okay, but what if we had another suitcase here that had a default value? Can I do this here? I'm kind of getting all over the place here. I apologize. But if you could imagine if we had another suitcase here that was like suitcase, let's just do this. We'll make a new one. Hash.new with a default value of 0, right? Now let's go see if this works. Okay, so now suitcase is an empty hash. Good. So that means I have this one, right? And now I want to add, oh gosh, that was loud. Add item. Now I want to add some shoes. What'll happen? Oh, darn it. Oh, I've got, okay. So sorry, I'm trying to like wing this here and it's not working. I did not plan for this.
Hashtag life of a programmer.
Yeah, I know.
You
Hold
have
on, I want to show this to you though.
Suitcase.
Oh, thank you. Was that always there? Oh goodness. Because scope-wise, this should still be able to see this. So let's. let's try that again. Add suitcase should be empty. If we add item, we want to add some socks. No, it's not working there. Okay. The point I'm trying to show you.
Suitcase dot add item item.
No, because this is not defined in a class. We're not in a class right here, and this could be part of the problem because I'm kind of just doing whatever in this file. I've got a lot of crap going on here. So let's do this. So I'm invoking this method. This method like should belong to a class, right? But it's just out in the middle of my file. I'm invoking this method so that it'll hit my pry. That's not the one I wanted to comment out. So let's see what that does. Okay, I'm inside my method. My item is shoes. My suitcase, there we go. All right, let's put this in here. I'm outside of my method scope. Okay. Let's do that again. All right, so now I'm inside of here. I should have my suitcase now. And I have my item, right? So if I run this next line, let's do it this way. Let's do suitcase item, right? So I'm doing a query. We know this suitcase is empty, but I can add things to it because it has a default value. So shoes are 2. Does that make sense, or did I just confuse everyone because I didn't have my stuff together?
It's defining it as shoes because you put add item with the symbol of shoes with the argument below your block up there, or your def end.
Yeah, so right, this is how normally we'd be calling this method on an object, but because I'm outside of a class right now, I'm just like in a RB file, you can define a method and then just call it by name, right? This is not how you would actually program. You'd want this to be encapsulated inside of a class. But I guess the thing I want you to focus on is maybe not my method creation here, but rather how, let's do it this way. What if you get rid of that one?
Because you set it to a default value, we can add to a 0, but we can't add to nil.
Exactly, right? So let's do it this way. Instead, let's have 2 suitcases here. One has a default value and one doesn't. Okay, so I have an item, which is my symbol of shoes, because I want to work with symbols as keys. Okay, if I try to suitcase 1, put in the item and add 2, what'll happen? Suitcase 1 has a default value. Well, this is what we just saw. It'll work, and our suitcase 1, awesome, now has that. But if we try the same exact thing on suitcase 2, right, plus equals 2, this is now where we're going to get a problem because suitcase 2 has no default values, which means when we do this query for a key that doesn't exist, we're going to get nil. This is the error I was looking for the first time, actually. Undefined method plus for nil class means we're calling this operation, this unary operator, on nil. This is evaluating to nil. Okay. Questions about that? That's kind of funky.
Kat,
Yes.
I think you're doing great.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
It was funky, Kat, but I do feel like that's like this whole thing that you just went through, like, is something that like we experience, right? And just being able to kind of see what the errors are throwing. I mean, this for me, it helps because I've definitely seen that undefined method plus for nil class. I'm like, well, what the heck? I just said that I wanted a hash. So that makes it a lot more sense for me, like to set it to a default versus just to an empty.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what I really want you to think about is every expression that you type in Ruby has a return value. And you need to know what that return value is because that determines how you can work with that return value, right? For example, the suitcase 2 we have, if we want to query a jacket, right? This is the suitcase 2 is the hash with no default value. If we query a key that does not exist, we're going to get nil. Okay, so now the rest of what we do needs to take that into account, because maybe you have control over how that hash is defined, maybe you don't. Okay, so you need to know what that return value is so you can know how to continue and accomplish whatever task you're trying to accomplish. Whereas with suitcase 1, when we do the query the item, remember item right now is a variable holding shoes, which, oh wait, shoot, didn't I already add shoes to it? Let's query something that doesn't exist. Suitcase 1, query what? Jacket. There's no jacket in here. What's going to be the return value now of this expression? When I hit enter, what's the return value? 0, right? Because we set a default value. Okay, and I'm not saying one is correct and one is incorrect. All I'm saying is you need to know what the return value is of the expression so that you know how you need to code the rest of the method. Okay, you should probably know how to handle both. Okay, so let's just recap really quick. We got kind of like sidetracked there, but that was fun. I like when that happens. So hashes, again, we are as a data structure, a collection in Ruby made with curly brackets, or we saw here we can define it by calling hash.new, and we can give it a default value. We don't have to, we can just call hash.new. It is made up of key value pairs separated by commas. Our keys are unique. Okay, so remember, if we have a key and we try to assign that same key, Ruby will override the existing key with whatever we're declaring as the new key. Okay, right? We talked about how to query hashes by using our bracket notation. Remember, we have to match the data type of our key, and this returns the value. And then we can use that to either reset values, to add new keys, and to access and manipulate our hash. Hash's order does not matter, right? But array's order does matter, and that's kind of our difference between those two collections. We also talked about iterating over a hash, and that with that we get 2 block variables, and then we could do whatever we want with it. Okay, final questions before we wrap up?
I have a question. Can you go back to the suitcase 1, suitcase 2 thing that you were just working on?
Absolutely.
So if for suitcase 1 equals hash.new, if you were to not pass it the 0, would you still be able to add things to it?
Great question. Let's try. So we have suitcase 1. We see it's empty hash, just like it's always been. So now let's do suitcase 1 like we were doing before. Item is a variable that was passed in, holding our symbol of shoes, and we want to add 2 shoes. Actually, let's just look at that. When we query suitcase 1 for the item, if there was a default value, we should get back whatever that default value is. Right now it's nil. We have not defined it. So when you do hash.new and you don't pass in an argument, there is no default value.
Okay.
Cool. All right, great question. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up and end the